Hello everyone, my name is Lina Hamad. I'm a final year medical student at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. The presentation today is based on a paper that Dr. Laura Machin from Lancaster University and I have been working on, and it shares the title of today's presentation, Exploring Prospective Donors' Perspectives on Stem Cell Donation for Cell and Gene Therapy Research and Development. To date, there are several stem cell therapies that have been authorized for use clinically, but there are still some challenges that impede the integration of cell and gene therapy into clinical practice. These challenges include, but are not limited to, securing funding, logistical difficulties, disorganized regulatory measures, and manufacturing scale-up. These challenges prompted the formation of worldwide publicly funded agencies whose aim is to bridge the gap between cell and gene therapy research and clinical practice. And these agencies do so by leveraging collaborations across multiple public and private organizations. Amongst these not-for-profit organizations are stem cell registries and charities. These organizations are sitting at the cutting edge of translation and research, sourcing and supplying the very starting material that are needed to conduct research to the cell and gene therapy industry. Now, given that these organizations' role entails direct involvement with prospective donors to provide the stem cells, it is likely that a multitude of ethical considerations will emerge. This table provides a brief overview of the ethical concerns related to stem cell donation for research and biobanking. For example, trust in public university-funded research is high, but decreases when collaborations with private enterprises and for-profit institutes take place. These collaborations may be viewed by the public as a compromise to the academic institute's commitment to their mission of public service, and this would eventually lead to a loss of trust in the public sector. The issue of informed consent emerges in relation to subsequent commercialization of products and therapies resulting from donated biospecimens. And consent is also prominent when financial support by private bodies is provided to the public biobank, especially when funding was not addressed during the initial consent process. When it comes to privacy concerns, these are well known and are mainly related to the risk of re-identification and the risk of discrimination and stigmatization. And involvement of private funders may exacerbate these privacy concerns, especially if data sharing was to take place with for-profit organizations. And when it comes to commercialization, potential donors for stem cell research demonstrate concerns over the distribution of profits from any commercialized therapies that might result from any donated specimens. So with all of that in mind, and because the relationship not-for-profit organizations have with their prospective donors is heavily reliant on trust in the charity to use the donated cells in an ethically appropriate manner, it is essential to understand the prospective donors' attitudes and perceptions on the sourcing of their stem cells by these charities to external organizations, specifically for the purpose of cell and gene therapy development. The results of this paper are based off of a survey that was completed in 2019 by 2,400 prospective stem cell donors who have been enrolled in a not-for-profit stem cell charity based in the UK. Approximately 10,000 people on the register were contacted with the aim for a 20% response rate. These individuals were randomly selected and computer-generated according to geography, gender, age, and ethnicity. Data entry and analysis of results were performed using the SPSS software, and the final number of participants after missing data were removed was 2,372 participants. In addition, 94 participants provided qualitative responses, which expanded upon or explained their quantitative responses in the survey. For the sake of time, I will only be reporting the most pertinent quantitative findings in this presentation. Participants were also asked about their level of understanding on the work of the charity. Over half of the participants reported good understanding on the work of the charity, and only 3% had little to no understanding. There was a statistically significant association between participants' understanding of the work of the charity and how comfortable they were with the charity receiving payments, whereby participants with a good understanding of the work of the charity were more likely to favor the charity receiving payments in comparison to participants with little or no understanding of the work of the charity. The overwhelming majority of participants were willing to donate their stem cells for research and novel treatment development. Those who were unsure those who were unsure that they would be willing to donate constituted 12%. However, amongst those who were unsure, 92% were comfortable with the charity collaborating with external organizations, and 85% were comfortable with the charity receiving payment. The majority of participants either strongly agreed or agreed with the charity collaborating with external organizations for novel treatment research and development. Similarly, the majority of participants were in agreement with the charity receiving payments from external organizations. There was a statistically significant association between participants' level of education and their degree of comfort with the charity receiving payments, and similarly, a significant association was also evident when it comes to the level of education of participants and their degree of comfort with the charity collaborating with external organizations. Whereby individuals or participants with higher levels of education were less likely to favor partnerships with external organizations, and similarly, participants with higher levels of education were also less likely to favor receiving payments from these external organizations. Moving on to the qualitative data, these were themed according to overarching broad topics. These topics mapped onto the participants' reasons for donation, concerns over donation, and facilitators of donation. It was evident from the responses that for some participants, the desire to help for the benefit of others was the single motivating factor behind their willingness to donate stem cells for research and novel treatments development. Collaborations with external organizations were viewed positively and were considered a step forward for the charity. It was also evident that some participants constructed a hierarchy of donation purposes. Some donors were supportive of donating stem cells for research purposes when the donations are a byproduct of their initial and primary purpose for donation, which is donating for patients in need. Other donors expressed willingness to donate for research when their stem cells are no longer viable for transplantation. For other participants, the decision to donate stem cells for research purposes was not so straightforward. While these participants were not vehemently against donations for research purposes, they exhibited concerns, particularly in relation to collaborations with external organizations. For example, it was clear from the qualitative responses that many participants had concerns over infringements of privacy, especially if external collaborations with third parties such as pharmaceutical companies were to take place. These concerns were related to security of data sharing, DNA profiling, and personal information security. Several participants also conveyed apprehensions over their donations leading to profiteering by pharmaceutical companies and had concerns over how these donations might affect, whether directly or otherwise, the affordability of treatments for patients. Many of the participants' responses signaled at the concept of informed consent and emphasized the value of transparency. One participant was in favor of external collaborations provided that the circumstances of these collaborations were clearly explained and relayed to the donors, specifically when it comes to receiving payments. Participants also demonstrated a strong desire for full disclosure of the anticipated uses of the stem cells, and this included disclosure of external collaborations involved and the purposes of these collaborations. To some participants, the decision was greatly influenced by the specific category to which these external organizations belong to. Some prospective donors may be more inclined to donate if partnerships were to take place with charities as opposed to private pharmaceutical companies. A certain level of distrust existed with regards to the intentions of the private sector, specifically when it comes to pharmaceutical companies and receiving payments from said companies. Yet it seemed that for many of the participants, a great deal of trust was instilled when it comes to the charity they're registered under, and that this trust alleviated the concerns that arose from partnerships with external organizations. It is worthy to note the timing of the data collection in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. The role pharmaceutical companies played in the recent pandemic could result in a great shift in the perceptions and attitudes of prospective donors. For example, a recent study published by the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry revealed a 24% increase in the public's positive views of the industry since the pandemic. So it is therefore possible that a similar shift in perceptions may be present among prospective donors today. The overwhelming majority of prospective donors were in support of donating stem cells for research and novel treatment development. The results are consistent with other studies in the literature assessing donors' willingness to donate blood for biobanking and embryos for stem cell research. The qualitative responses indicate that for some donors, therapeutic donations take precedence over donations for research purposes, and that a hierarchy of donation purposes exists for many prospective donors. Some donors would donate for cell and gene therapy research only when their cells are no longer viable for therapeutic donations. And now, at a first glance, this hierarchy may be seen as a challenge for the cell and gene therapy industry, and that it does so by setting limitations on the access to stem cells, especially since stem cells derived from older individuals were thought to be inadequate for use in regenerative therapies and their development. However, recent data suggests otherwise. So with all of that in mind, to increase access to stem cells for cell and gene therapy research and development, charities may benefit from targeting older donors whose stem cells may no longer be eligible for therapeutic transplantations, but can still be valuable for cell and gene therapy research and development. The results of this survey support the well-documented concerns over the risk of re-identification and potential for discrimination based on retrieved genetic information. To ensure donors' trust in charities remains uncompromised, prospective donors should be well informed on the General Data Protection Regulation Act, which states that genetic data is listed as sensitive personal information that can be processed only if overt consent from the data subject has been obtained. Furthermore, participants with higher education levels were less likely to favor collaborations with external organizations and external funding. Now, although studies in the literature suggest that donors with higher levels of education are more likely to donate organs and biospecimens for research purposes, this readiness may not be extended to not-for-profit organizations associating with external organizations. It could be argued that participants with higher levels of education may be more wary of the consequences such partnerships might ensue. And so, to facilitate stem cell donations for cell and gene therapy research and development, the consent process should be transparent, with full disclosure over the nature of the partnership project, the payment process between the involved parties, and any potential commercial value that might arise. This will allow prospective donors to be well informed when making their donation decisions. Some donors reported a moral responsibility to maintain universal access to healthcare and exhibited concerns over collaborations leading to profiteering and inaccessible, overpriced therapies. We hypothesize that these concerns will most likely linger in spite of new payment models that are being developed to increase patient access to cell and gene therapies. Therefore, it would be useful for future research to determine donors' perceptions and understanding of the process of cell and gene therapy development and manufacturing. Now, interestingly, most prospective donors who were unsure of their willingness to donate for cell and gene therapy research were in favor of the charity partnering with and receiving funding from external establishments. Given that these participants are already enrolled in the registry, it could be hypothesized that for these donors, the perceived level of benefit arising from therapeutic donations aimed at saving lives and improving the quality of lives of others may outweigh the perceived risks associated with the donation process. However, the same may not apply for donations made for novel treatments, research, and development. And so it is likely that further inquiry into the factors that influence prospective donors' decisions to donate stem cells for cell and gene therapy research may be necessary to facilitate donations. And given that donors with good understanding on the work of the charity were more likely to agree with the receipt of payments, not-for-profit organizations may benefit from education initiatives aimed at increasing donors' awareness on the process of stem cell collection, as well as the work of these charities to increase donors' willingness to donate stem cells and acceptance of partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. Now, finally, it was possible to gain insight into the perceptions of some prospective donors on pharmaceutical companies and the disparities that surface when comparing donors' views on private establishments versus charitable organizations. It was also evident that some donors experience a moral obligation and keenness to influence the directions of any donations made, and so accordingly it would be worthwhile to disentangle donors' perceptions surrounding the private sector and gain deeper insight into what is deemed to be ethical engagement between charitable organizations and commercial organizations. It would also be useful to explore donors' perceptions on how trust can be constructed and when is it undermined to construct ethical policies and practices surrounding private and public partnerships. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. Also, please note that this paper is still a work in progress, and so your feedback would be highly appreciated. Thank you so much.